Hello there, and welcome to the Mad Human Channel, your quiet corner of the mind where curiosity meets calm, and science stretches out like a vast night sky full of unasked questions. Tonight, we're not wandering through forests that whisper to one another, nor are we tracing the hidden patterns of time. Instead, we're stepping into one of the strangest, most mind-bending mysteries of all, the possibility that our universe may not be the only one. That beyond the veil of stars and galaxies we see, there could be countless others, hidden realms, endless variations of reality, an entire multiverse. Where are you listening from tonight? And what time is it in your corner of existence? Share it in the comments, because it never ceases to amaze me how these soft explorations ripple across so many places at once, linking us together in a way that almost feels cosmic. And if tonight's journey stirs your curiosity, if it makes you pause, breathe, and wonder, feel free to leave a gentle like, maybe subscribe, so you can return whenever the universe calls you back. Now, if you wish, let your eyes soften, your breath steady. Imagine yourself floating in the quiet dark, as if the stars themselves are your ceiling. Tonight, we are venturing into a question that has haunted both philosophers and physicists alike. Are we truly alone in this universe? Or is our universe just one bubble in an infinite cosmic sea? Imagine existence not as a single canvas, but as an endless gallery. Our universe, with its galaxies, stars, planets, and laws of physics, is but one painting on the wall. Next to it, perhaps, hangs another canvas. A universe with different colors, different laws, maybe even different versions of you. The idea of the multiverse stretches the mind until it nearly snaps. And yet, modern science dares to whisper that it might be real. If you allow your mind to drift into this question, you might picture the universe you know. The one where you sit now, listening, as a vast, expanding bubble, floating in darkness. But what if this bubble is only one among countless others, each with its own stars, its own histories, maybe even its own version of you living a slightly different life? Some scientists call this the cosmic inflation idea, where the Big Bang was not a single event, but part of an ongoing process, bubbling universes into being like foam on the crest of a wave. In that vision, our universe is just one froth among infinite froths, each with its own physics, its own story unfolding. And then there's the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, which suggests that every decision, every roll of the dice, every flicker of possibility splits reality into multiple paths, so that even as you sit here, there might be another you who paused this video, another you who never found this channel, another you who took a completely different road years ago. The mind resists this idea at first because it makes our sense of singular reality feel slippery, but if you sit with it, if you let your imagination rest against it, you begin to feel something oddly comforting, the possibility that reality is not fragile, not limited, but abundant beyond comprehension. It is as though existence itself refuses to be confined to one story, one script, one destiny. And yet, this raises questions that spiral like galaxies. If there are infinite universes, do they ever touch, ever collide, ever bleed into one another? Could déjà vu be a shadow of another life brushing against this one? Could dreams be windows into parallel realms, flickers of what another version of you is living right now? Science, cautious and exacting, cannot yet prove these things, but physics whispers their possibility, and philosophy leans in closer, asking us to consider what it would mean if reality were layered, fractal, endlessly unfolding. If the multiverse is real, then everything that can happen has happened and is happening somewhere. And in that thought lies both wonder and humility. Wonder because it means that reality is so much bigger than we ever imagined. Humility because it reminds us that our universe, our lives, our choices, may be just one thread in a tapestry so vast it cannot be seen in its entirety. And yet even with that impossibly vast perspective, we are still left with the haunting question of what it means to be alive here. Now, in this particular thread of reality, because if the multiverse truly stretches outward in endless directions, then our own existence takes on two contradictory qualities at once. It feels smaller, almost microscopic in comparison to the infinite expanse, and yet also infinitely precious, because of all the countless ways things might have unfolded. It was this fragile sliver of possibility, that you are living through right now, this conversation, this breath, this moment, a constellation of choices and chances stacked upon each other since the birth of the universe. The physicists speak in equations, in inflationary models and quantum splits, in probability amplitudes and decoherence, but beyond the mathematics there is a deeper human resonance in the multiverse idea, for it challenges not only our understanding of physics but also of identity, memory, and meaning, suggesting that the you who wakes each morning is not a singular monolith but a branching presence, with echoes playing out across endless corridors of existence, some brighter, some darker, some heartbreakingly similar and others almost unrecognizable, and the mind strains to hold such an image yet still finds itself wandering into the what-ifs. What if in another universe you had pursued that forgotten dream, or never met the person who shaped you, or walked away instead of staying? What if you could glimpse those other versions of yourself for even an instant? Would you feel envy, regret, relief, or some strange companionship with the multitudes of you that exist beyond this? 1. And here is where philosophy meets physics, because while the scientists build models of bubble universes and many worlds branching with every quantum decision, the philosophers remind us that these ideas are not only about cosmology but about consciousness itself, for to believe in infinite realities is also to accept that our awareness, the tiny flame of I am burning within you, is inextricably tied to one vantage point, one river of time, and though others may exist we can never truly step into their waters, leaving us with a paradoxical longing, a curiosity without closure. And still, perhaps that longing is the point, because the human spirit thrives on questions more than answers, on wonder more than certainty, and the multiverse, whether real or metaphorical, gifts us with the greatest wonder of all. That reality is not a closed box but a boundless ocean, its depths unknown, its horizons without end, and in contemplating it we feel both the terror and the beauty of infinity pressing softly against the edges of our imagination, reminding us that even in the vastness of countless universes, this present breath, this beating heart, this fleeting moment of awareness is a miracle so profound that it does not require 1,000 other versions to give it weight. It is enough in itself, and yet it glimmers with the possibility that everything we cannot see may be just as real, just as alive, just as quietly unfolding beyond the veil of our perception. And so let us drift even deeper into the fabric of this possibility, imagining the birth of universes not as singular miracles but as repeating rhythms, like waves upon an endless cosmic shore, because one of the strongest scientific hints that the multiverse may be real comes from the theory of eternal inflation, where the Big Bang that gave rise to our universe was not a solitary event but part of an infinite blossoming, each bang spawning a bubble of spacetime with its own unique laws of physics, some perhaps hostile to life, collapsing quickly into silence, and others, like ours, finding a delicate balance that allows galaxies, stars, and conscious beings to emerge. Picture these bubbles expanding, drifting, never touching yet filling a vast and incomprehensible background of higher dimensional space, and within each one the arrow of time begins, carrying forward all the possible histories that reality can sustain, so that our universe, with its precise mix of particles and forces, is just one verse in an infinite cosmic poem, and in this vision we realize that the very reason we find ourselves here, pondering, breathing, existing, is because in universes, where the constants of physics did not align to permit atoms or molecules or chemistry, no one could ask these questions at all, which means that our existence is not only fragile but profoundly conditional, a rare flicker in the dark where the right conditions allowed self-awareness to bloom. And then, even deeper still, we step into the unsettling corridors of quantum mechanics, where the many worlds interpretation insists that reality does not choose between possibilities but branches endlessly, so that every time a particle wavers between states, every time a decision tips one way or another, the universe splits, carrying both outcomes forward in parallel, invisible yet equally real, and so in one stream of existence you are listening to this sentence, while in another you clicked away minutes ago, and in yet another you never found this channel at all, each version unaware of the others yet all moving forward as real as the one you call your own. And though this sounds like science fiction, it is taken seriously by physicists because it removes the need for collapse, treating quantum uncertainty not as something erased but as something multiplied, infinitely, forever, which means that the multiverse may not only be a grand collection of distant bubbles but also an intimate branching of our own lives into countless possible futures, all coexisting just out of sight. And if that vision does not already stretch the mind to its breaking point, Then string theory steps in with its suggestion that our entire universe may be a vibrating membrane floating in a higher dimensional expanse. One brain among many, occasionally brushing against others, sparking new universes in the collision. And suddenly the multiverse feels less like a distant abstraction and more like a vast community of worlds, separated by invisible dimensions we cannot yet touch. Their gravitational echoes perhaps faintly tugging at our cosmos, leaving signatures we one day might detect. But beyond the physics lies the human heart, and the multiverse is not just equations and models, it is also a mirror for our longing, for our questions about identity and fate, for the ache of wondering how life might have been if we had chosen differently. And in this framework, those longings are not just idle imagination but reflections of realities that may actually exist, parallel streams where each of your unlived possibilities is playing out, where the road not taken was taken, where the goodbye was never said, where the dream abandoned was pursued to its end. And if you let yourself sit with that vision, you might feel the strange mix of melancholy and comfort, knowing that in the multiverse nothing is truly lost, that somewhere, some version of you is living the life you sometimes glimpse in daydreams, and yet at the same time the life you are in now is not less real, not less valuable, for it is the one you inhabit, the one where your awareness rests, and this moment, this breath, this fragile presence, is a miracle regardless of what else exists beyond. And so we return to the haunting thought that perhaps the multiverse is not only a physical reality but also a philosophical and psychological one, shaping how we think about meaning, memory, and the passage of time. For if infinite versions of us exist, then what does it mean to be you? What does it mean to make choices, to carry regrets, to celebrate triumphs, if somewhere another you is doing the opposite? And yet the answer might be this, that even in infinity the local matters, the specific matters, because awareness can only rest in one place at a time, and the fact that it rests here with you now is reason enough to live deeply into it, to notice it, to cherish it. And so the multiverse, whether or not it can be proven by telescopes or equations, becomes a meditation on presence, on the extraordinary improbability of being alive, aware, conscious in this particular sliver of the infinite. And as you breathe, as you listen, as you wonder, you may realize that the very act of contemplating infinity makes your finite moment expand, stretch, and glow with a kind of timeless significance. Because in the face of endless universes, what else can we do but marvel? This one. And as this vision stretches further, imagine the sheer architecture of possibility that would surround us if every quantum flicker, every molecular vibration, every cosmic expansion were not a narrowing of chance but an opening of doors, an endless hallway of rooms all occupied at once, each containing a slightly different shade of reality, some eerily familiar and others so alien they would defy recognition, because in one branch the universe may be governed by slightly altered constants. Where stars never ignite, in another gravity might be too weak to hold galaxies together, and in yet another, chemical bonds might form in bizarre configurations leading to life forms we cannot imagine. And then, closer to home, one version of you may be waking tomorrow in a city you never moved to here, pursuing a career you never considered here, loving someone you never met here, and though your awareness cannot step across that invisible threshold, the thought alone is enough to remind you of the richness of possibility hidden within the structure of existence. And scientists, though cautious, admit that the mathematics of our best theories almost insist upon these realities, that eternal inflation, string landscapes, and quantum branching all converge toward a cosmos that refuses to be singular, refuses to be confined, and instead demands infinity as its canvas. And though proof remains elusive, the very pursuit of such knowledge drives us into new technologies, new experiments, peering into the faint radiation left from the Big Bang, measuring the subtle distribution of galaxies for patterns that might whisper of other universes brushing against ours, or searching quantum behaviors for anomalies that suggest unseen branches humming just beneath the surface. And as these investigations unfold, we who are not scientists still find ourselves swept into the poetry of it. For the multiverse is not just a concept but a metaphor for our own inner lives, because just as there may be infinite universes, so too are there infinite selves within us. Selves that emerge in imagination, in memory, in longing, selves we might have been, selves we still might become, and in this way the multiverse becomes both cosmic and intimate, reflecting back to us the complexity of human identity, reminding us that we are not fixed, not singular, but fluid beings carrying galaxies within our minds. And even if no telescope ever detects a neighboring universe, the fact that we can conceive of one is itself a profound act of creation, a sign that our consciousness is capable of spanning distances no spacecraft could reach, and perhaps this, too, is part of the story of existence, that evolution has not only built brains to survive but to dream beyond survival, to peer into infinity, to imagine realities beyond our own, and in that imagination to find meaning. For what else is awe but the recognition of something larger than ourselves, and what else is the multiverse if not awe expanded to its ultimate degree? A recognition that reality may be so vast, so intricate, so endlessly diverse that our every attempt to capture it will always fall short, and yet still we try, still we tell stories, still we write equations, still we paint mental pictures of infinite galleries, because the act of wondering makes us more alive, enlarges our moment, slows our sense of time, lifts us above the routines that so often shrink our days into repetition. And so the multiverse, whether literal or metaphorical, gifts us with the chance to remember how extraordinary it is to exist, here, now, in this particular thread of possibility, breathing in this universe while others, if they exist, hum quietly beyond our reach. And perhaps the deepest truth is not whether we can prove their existence, but whether we can allow the thought of them to transform our way of being in this one, nudging us to live more attentively, to seek novelty, to cherish choice, because in imagining infinite worlds we are reminded of the miracle of this world. In imagining infinite selves we are reminded of the irreplaceable value of this self. And so we sit with the paradox. Small in the face of infinity, yet infinitely meaningful in the face of awareness, and let it wash over us like a tide from shores we may never see, carrying within it the quiet suggestion that the universe, whether singular or infinite, is not something we must conquer with certainty but something we are invited to marvel at, to listen to inhabit with reverence, until our brief thread of awareness weaves back into the vast tapestry from which it came. And if we keep peeling back the layers of this grand tapestry, we realize that the multiverse is not just an abstract idea floating in physics journals but a living, breathing question that stretches across science, philosophy, spirituality, and even art, because when we ask, are there other universes beyond ours? We are also asking, what is the nature of reality itself? And suddenly the room we sit in feels larger, as though the walls have become porous and the ceiling has dissolved into stars, and we sense that our tiny corner of the cosmos may be connected to something immeasurable, something beyond measure itself. And here we can pause to imagine the structure of eternal inflation as not just a sterile mathematical model but as a blooming cosmic tree, where each inflationary burst is like a bud opening into its own universe, expanding outward with its own flavor of physics, its own constants, its own potential for complexity. And in this image we are leaves on one branch, unaware of the countless other leaves that rustle unseen, yet all nourished by the same trunk of reality. And this metaphor brings a strange intimacy to an otherwise overwhelming concept, reminding us that though we are small, we are also participants in a vast, shared flowering. But then we slide sideways into the quantum world again, where the many worlds interpretation whispers its unsettling promise that every choice you make fractures reality into divergent streams. One where you said yes, another where you said no, one where you turned left, another where you turned right, and these worlds, though invisible, are equally real, each populated by versions of you living out the consequences of decisions you will never feel here. And though this might seem dizzying, perhaps it offers a kind of solace too, because it means no possibility is ever entirely lost, no dream completely erased, but rather all of them ripple outward somewhere, somehow in an endless branching of fates. And yet, does this lessen the weight of our choices here, or does it make them more profound? Because while infinite versions may exist, only one is alive in your awareness at this moment, only one is hearing these words, only one is breathing in this exact configuration of chance. And so the preciousness of this thread of existence becomes even sharper, even more luminous, when set against the backdrop of infinity. And then there is string theory, with its whisper of hidden dimensions folded so tightly we cannot perceive them, but within their compact curls entire universes may vibrate, whole realities humming like unseen notes in a cosmic symphony. And in this metaphor we are not just inhabitants of a universe but players in an orchestra too vast to ever fully hear, each universe another instrument resonating in the silence of higher dimensions, their harmonies brushing against one another in ways we may only faintly detect as anomalies in the cosmic background or as mysteries in the fabric of gravity itself. And as we contemplate this, our minds stretch to contain paradoxes they were never built to hold. And in that stretching there is wonder, there is awe, there is the unmistakable sense that simply to be conscious of these possibilities is to stand on sacred ground, because even if the multiverse remains unproven, the act of imagining it draws us out of the narrow corridors of habit and routine and into vast halls of possibility where thought itself becomes cosmic. And perhaps this is why humans, across cultures and eras, have always spoken of multiple worlds, whether in myths of layered heavens and underworlds, in visions of parallel dream realms, or in modern scientific equations, because something in us senses that the reality we touch is only one layer of a larger whole. Something in us resists the idea that existence could be confined to a single, fragile bubble, and so we tell stories of infinite worlds not only because the math suggests them but because the human spirit craves them, craves the idea that beyond every ending there might be another beginning, that beyond every silence there might be another song. And as we sit with this, let us imagine for a moment that in some parallel universe you are not listening but speaking, you are not alone but with someone you lost here, you are not weary but full of energy, you are not questioning but certain, and though you cannot touch that other you, the thought that they may exist fills this moment with a bittersweet beauty, a reminder that our lives are both finite and infinite at once, finite in awareness, infinite in possibility, and perhaps the wisdom is not to chase after other universes but to let the vision of them teach us how to live more fully in this one, to take each day as a rare gift against a backdrop of endless alternatives, to honor the fact that of all the infinite versions of you that may exist, it is this one, here and now, that is real, awake, alive. And if we allow this thought to keep flowing, to stretch itself across the canvas of our imagination without resistance, we begin to see how the multiverse concept is not only a theoretical scaffolding for physicists but also a mirror for our own lived experience, because just as the cosmos may be built of branching realities, so too are our memories, our identities, and our possibilities built of countless paths that were once open and now live only as shadows in the mind. And this connection between the cosmic and the personal makes the subject resonate even more deeply, because every what-if you've ever carried is in essence a small echo of the multiverse itself. Every fork in your life's road a reminder that reality could have been otherwise, and as strange as it sounds, your daydreams about the life not lived, your regrets about the chances not taken, and even your casual musings about how things might have gone are all little windows into the same paradox that physics wrestles with, that reality might not be singular, that possibility might be just as real as actuality. And when we take this seriously, the very definition of real begins to blur, because if another version of you exists in a universe where you chose differently, then which one is the true you? And perhaps the answer is that both are, that reality is less about fixed identity and more about a vast network of possibilities unfolding in different ways, each equally valid, each equally complete, and yet, from the seat of consciousness, from this thread of awareness, it feels singular, it feels like only one path, only one body, only one life, and therein lies the paradox that makes the multiverse both dizzying and beautiful. It is infinite, and yet we experience it as finite, it is many, and yet we hold it as one, it is cosmic, and yet it reflects the intimate inner world of our own longing. And science, while careful, has already given us so many clues that support this vision. Cosmic microwave background radiation that might carry the scars of other universes brushing against ours, mathematical landscapes of string theory predicting more solutions than there could possibly be universes to fill them, quantum experiments showing that particles behave as though all outcomes exist until observation collapses them, and inflationary models of the early cosmos that almost demand multiple bubble universes expanding in the froth of eternal inflation, so that even if our universe is unimaginably vast, it might still be only a drop in a limitless ocean, and as our telescopes grow sharper, as our particle accelerators dig deeper into the subatomic weave, and as our equations stretch into realms our senses cannot follow, the possibility of the multiverse continues to linger at the edge of what we know, like a horizon that moves further away the closer we approach, tantalizing, elusive, and yet profoundly moving, because even if we never cross that horizon, even if direct proof never comes, the act of turning our minds toward it enlarges us, gives us perspective, and reminds us that existence is richer, stranger, and more intricate than we can ever fully grasp. And in that mystery there is a quiet beauty, a kind of cosmic humility. For to know that we may be only one bubble among infinite bubbles, one string among infinite vibrations, one choice among infinite choices, is to be reminded of both our smallness and our significance, our fleetingness and our wonder, and in this paradox we find not despair but awe that we exist at all, awe that we can think these thoughts, awe that consciousness itself is capable of imagining infinities beyond infinities, and perhaps that awe is the true gift of the multiverse, not certainty, not proof, but the expansion of the soul that comes from gazing into the infinite and letting it gaze back into us. And if we lean even further into this river of thought, allowing it to carry us without resistance, we begin to see how the multiverse isn't simply a cold scientific hypothesis but a deeply human idea, one that has appeared across myths, religions, and cultures long before particle physicists or cosmologists ever gave it formal equations. Because in Hindu cosmology there is the notion of countless worlds created and dissolved in cycles, each universe breathing in and out in the eternal rhythm of Vishnu's slumber, and in Buddhist thought the idea of innumerable realms of existence layered like veils, each with its own beings, its own laws, its own struggles, while Norse mythology spoke of Yggdrasil, the great world tree, whose roots and branches hold many worlds, and indigenous traditions across the planet have told stories of dreamtime layers, spirit worlds, or parallel planes of being, suggesting that perhaps our ancestors intuited, through imagination or mystical vision, something. Modern physics now dares to suggest with mathematics that reality may not be one but many, not a single thread but a tapestry, and in seeing this, the multiverse begins to blur the line between science and spirituality, between reason and myth, reminding us that our deepest wonder has always leaned toward infinity. And yet the scientific multiverse is not a single theory but many, each with its own strange flavor. The Level 1 multiverse, where space itself is so vast that beyond the observable horizon, other regions exist where matter arranges itself differently, producing universes much like ours but forever beyond our reach. The Level 2 multiverse, born from eternal inflation, where each bubble universe may follow its own physics, its own constants, its own dimensions. The Level 3 multiverse of quantum many worlds, where every possible outcome of every quantum event spawns a branching reality. And the Level 4 multiverse, the most audacious of all, proposed by Max Tegmark, where every mathematically possible structure exists as its own universe, meaning that reality itself is not physical but mathematical, that numbers are not symbols of things but the very essence of existence. And if we sit with this, if we allow the mind to stretch into these categories, we realize that the question, do we live in a multiverse? Is actually many questions folded into one, and the awe is not only in the possible answers but in the vastness of the landscape itself. And then we wonder, how would it feel to truly know? Would confirmation of the multiverse diminish the uniqueness of our lives? Or would it expand it, making us part of something immeasurably greater? Imagine that tomorrow, scientists discovered definitive proof. A signal in the cosmic microwave background that could only come from another universe colliding with ours, or an unmistakable pattern in particle physics that confirms the many worlds interpretation, and suddenly the headlines scream, "We are not alone in reality." How would you live differently knowing there are countless other versions of you walking countless other paths? Would regret lose its sting, knowing another you made the choice you didn't? Or would meaning deepen, knowing this particular life is one fragile note in a cosmic symphony of endless variations? These questions are not easy, but they are rich, and perhaps the point is not to answer them but to feel them, to let them open the doors of perception. Because whether the multiverse exists or not, the act of imagining it awakens something inside us, something ancient and restless, something that hungers for infinity. And maybe that hunger itself is proof of something larger, that we are not merely biological accidents but beings wired to yearn for the infinite, wired to seek beyond horizons, wired to imagine realities beyond our own. And in that yearning lies the beauty of the human spirit, because even if our universe were all there is, the fact that we can envision countless others already makes us infinite in a way, already stretches our reality beyond the limits of stars and galaxies, into realms of possibility that exist in the architecture of thought. And in the end perhaps that is the true multiverse. Not just the bubbles of space or the branches of quantum possibility, but the boundless universes that open whenever a human mind dares to wonder. And if we keep following this current, deeper and deeper into the ocean of possibility, we find ourselves standing at the crossroads of physics and philosophy, where the hard equations of cosmology brush shoulders with the soft questions of existence. Because if the multiverse is true, then consciousness itself may not be confined to this single stage of reality but could be something that flows across countless theaters, appearing in one form here and in another form elsewhere, endlessly recycled, endlessly refracted, like light shining through a prism that casts infinite rays in different directions, each beam carrying its own version of you. And suddenly the age-old questions of life, death, and meaning acquire entirely new dimensions. For what does it mean to die if there are other universes where your story continues? What does it mean to regret if in another timeline you walked the road you missed here? What does it mean to dream if perhaps your mind is peering across the veil into another life running parallel to this one? In that sense, déjà vu, the uncanny feeling of having lived a moment before, might be more than a neurological hiccup. It could be the brief resonance of two realities brushing against one another, your consciousness momentarily catching the echo of its sibling in another universe. And think of dreams, those vivid worlds where you walk streets you've never seen, meet faces you somehow know, experience joys and terrors that feel as real as waking. What if some dreams are not fabrications of your brain but windows, keyholes into parallel lives where another version of you is living even now? Science may scoff, for it demands proof measurable and repeatable, but the imagination whispers and myth nods, and within us something stirs, because even without proof, the idea feels strangely right, like an old truth remembered. And when we consider identity in this context, things grow even stranger, for if infinite versions of you exist, then what does you truly mean? Is your identity tied to this particular body, this particular chain of memories, or is it something larger, a pattern, a resonance that expresses itself differently in different worlds, like a melody played on countless instruments, always recognizable, always unique and yet never confined to one form? And if this is so, then death itself may not be an end but a transition, the fading of one instrument while the melody plays on elsewhere, a comfort and a mystery all at once, because it means you are both fleeting and eternal, small and infinite, bound to this life yet part of countless others. And the multiverse, if nothing else, reminds us of the humility we must hold before existence, because the stories we tell of afterlives, reincarnation, dream realms, and heavens may all be metaphors for something the cosmos is already doing, something grander and stranger than any one tradition could contain. And in this realization, science and spirituality cease to be enemies and instead become two voices in the same choir, both singing of mystery, both urging us to expand our vision. And perhaps that is why stories, science fiction especially, have long gravitated toward the multiverse, because art, like physics, senses the itch of infinity and cannot help but explore it. Think of Borges' Garden of Forking Paths, where every decision births another reality, or the comic book multiverses where heroes meet alternate selves, or films like Everything Everywhere All at Once that take the chaos and comedy of infinite lives and turn it into something profoundly human, reminding us that whether or not the multiverse is true in a physical sense, it already exists in our culture, our myths, our hearts, and in that way it is already real, shaping how we see ourselves, how we make meaning, how we imagine possibility. And maybe this is the ultimate lesson, that the multiverse is less about escaping this life into fantasies of infinite others, and more about realizing that even here, even now, this life is part of something vast, mysterious, and interconnected, and the awe of that realization slows time, deepens breath, and roots us in wonder, because to know, or even to imagine, that we are not alone in reality, that existence itself is layered and abundant beyond measure, is to step outside the small frame of our daily worries and glimpse, however briefly, the infinite. And if we extend this thread further, pulling it through the loom of science and imagination, we arrive at the frontier of inquiry, where tomorrow's discoveries may either shatter or illuminate our deepest suspicions about the multiverse, because physicists already whisper of signatures we might one day detect. Ripples in the cosmic microwave background, the faint afterglow of the Big Bang, that could betray the scars of our universe brushing against another, like two soap bubbles colliding in the dark, or perhaps gravitational waves, those subtle tremors in spacetime itself, carrying information not only about colliding black holes but about collisions between entire universes, vast beyond comprehension. And then there is the growing intrigue of quantum computing, a technology built upon the strange logic of superposition, where particles exist in multiple states at once until observed, and some theorists have wondered aloud whether each calculation carried out in a quantum computer might in some way borrow from, or echo into parallel realities, meaning that the very tools we are building to solve practical problems could one day hint at the existence of countless unseen worlds. Yet, even as science sharpens its instruments and crafts its telescopes, we must recognize that the multiverse may always hover at the edge of provability, existing in a realm just beyond what we can test, a horizon forever receding as we approach it, and this, paradoxically, may be its truest power, not as a confirmed fact but as an invitation, a canvas for wonder that stretches our thinking beyond the narrow lanes of daily life, because whether proven or not, the idea itself reshapes the way we understand meaning, choice, and existence. For imagine what it would mean to know that every choice you make is both trivial and infinite at once. Trivial because another version of you made the opposite choice in another world. Infinite because here, in this timeline, the weight of your decision still matters, still shapes the narrative of this unique life. It's like holding a jewel that reflects endless versions of itself in every direction, and yet the jewel in your hand is still singular, still irreplaceable, and so the multiverse, instead of diminishing your importance, may deepen it, for it suggests that the infinite exists, yet you are experiencing this particular strand of it, and that makes it precious beyond measure. And so the search continues, with particle accelerators smashing matter at unimaginable speeds, with cosmologists combing through faint whispers of radiation from the dawn of time, with philosophers and storytellers sketching the implications in words and metaphors, each in their own way trying to grasp the ungraspable, and maybe, just maybe, the proof will never come in the form of data alone, but in the resonance it awakens in us, the same resonance you might feel now, listening, when the mind stretches outward and the heart swells at the thought of infinity, because the multiverse, whether real or imagined, is already doing its work. It is expanding us, teaching us humility, sharpening our awe, reminding us that we are not the center but also not insignificant, that we are part of a mystery so vast that even our wildest dreams barely graze its surface, and perhaps the real task is not to solve it but to live with it, to carry that sense of infinite possibility into our everyday lives, letting it soften our regrets, widen our compassion, and deepen our sense of wonder for this fragile, fleeting, irreplaceable universe we call home. And if we let the thread of thought wander further, drifting into the meeting place between the multiverse and free will, we find ourselves in one of the most paradoxical yet tantalizing regions of philosophy, because if infinite universes exist, branching at every possible decision, then every choice you could make has already been made somewhere else. Every road you could walk is being walked right now by another version of you, and in that light, the question arises, does free will even exist, or are we simply passengers in a vast tree of inevitabilities, experiencing one branch while all others continue without us? Yet, if you lean closer to the question, you notice something subtle. Even if all outcomes exist in some multiverse, your awareness, this you, right here, listening to this thought, still feels the weight of decision, still must choose in this strand of reality, and that choice shapes the unique story unfolding here, even if other stories are being written elsewhere. So free will is not erased but reframed, not the power to control the entire tree, but the power to live this branch with intention, to shape this timeline with meaning, and in that way the multiverse does not diminish freedom but deepens it, because it reminds us that life is not about chasing certainty but about inhabiting possibility. And then there is the way religions and spiritual traditions across the world echo with hints of multiversal thinking, long before physics gave it language. Ancient Hindu cosmology spoke of endless cycles of creation and destruction, countless worlds blooming and dissolving across eternity. Buddhist teachings whispered of innumerable realms of existence layered beyond the visible. Mystics in many traditions described visions of overlapping realities, dream worlds, heavens and hells coexisting with the earthly one, each reflecting different aspects of the soul's journey, and even in Christianity, the idea of many mansions in the Father's house can be read as a metaphor for infinite realms. These parallels do not prove the multiverse in a scientific sense, but they reveal something essential, that humanity has always intuited the possibility of layered existence, that our myths, prayers, and dreams have been reaching toward infinity long before telescopes and particle accelerators tried to measure it. And perhaps that is why the idea resonates so deeply, because it is not foreign, not new, but a continuation of something we have always felt in our bones, the sense that reality is more abundant, more mysterious, more infinite than what our senses alone can perceive. And if this is true, then humanity's future may be shaped not just by the discoveries we make but by the imaginations we nurture, because the multiverse, whether or not it is proven, calls us to think bigger, to step outside the narrow lines of individualism and nationalism, and to see ourselves as part of a cosmos where everything that can exist does exist, where every story matters and yet no story is final. And one day, perhaps, our descendants will stand at the threshold of multiversal travel, not in the crude science fiction sense of hopping between worlds with machines, but in subtler, stranger ways, through consciousness itself, through the deep understanding of quantum reality that may reveal bridges between layers of existence. And when that day comes, the question of identity, of humanity, of meaning will be rewritten yet again, because to step into another universe is not only to explore new stars but to confront new versions of yourself, to meet the mirror of choices not taken, to witness lives you might have lived. And even if we never reach that day, even if the multiverse remains forever beyond our grasp, the act of considering it already transforms us, already slows us, already fills us with wonder, because it teaches us to see this life, the one we are living now, not as small or constrained, but as luminous and precious, a thread in an endless tapestry that stretches beyond comprehension. And in that recognition, the ordinary becomes extraordinary, the fleeting becomes infinite, and the question of whether the multiverse exists becomes less important than the way it changes how we live here, now, in this fragile yet miraculous universe we call our own. And if we follow this river even deeper, letting it carry us into the confluence of the multiverse and consciousness, we arrive at questions that are as unsettling as they are beautiful, because if reality truly branches into infinite possibilities, then what role does consciousness play in weaving one possibility into lived experience? Does the act of awareness collapse the branching wave of potential into a single unfolding story, as quantum physics suggests with its observer effect? Or is consciousness itself not confined to one universe but spread across many, a vast field touching all possibilities at once, only appearing localized because the mind cannot process infinity in its raw form? And if that is so, then what we think of as you may be both smaller and larger than imagined, smaller because the version you experience is just one thread among countless, larger because the deeper self, the field of awareness behind it, may transcend these divisions entirely, existing across the multiverse like light shining through many windows. And here we find resonance with ancient spiritual traditions that spoke of the soul as eternal, infinite, and indivisible, expressing itself in countless forms yet never reduced to any one of them, as though mystics long ago sensed what physics now hints at. That reality is layered and consciousness is the loom that weaves those layers into meaning. And if that is true, then even artificial intelligence, the very machines humanity is building, could one day open doorways to these truths, because as AI grows in complexity, some speculate it may stumble upon patterns in data that reveal not just this universe's structure but the echoes of others, hidden in mathematical symmetries we have not yet learned to read. And perhaps consciousness itself could be expanded by merging biological minds with artificial ones, stretching awareness into forms capable of glimpsing realities beyond this single frame, so that the future of humanity is not just spacefaring but universefaring, not just exploring stars but exploring layers of existence itself. Yet, with such visions come deep questions. If infinite versions of humanity exist, if infinite outcomes are already playing out, then what becomes of meaning, of morality, of love? Do these things dissolve into relativity, or do they become even more urgent? Because in a multiverse where everything that can exist does exist, the only thing that matters is how fully, how tenderly, how courageously you inhabit this particular life, this fleeting moment, this singular thread of infinity. And perhaps that is the hidden gift of the multiverse, not to distract us with the fantasy of other worlds, but to return us to this one with a sharper sense of awe, to remind us that the miracle is not that countless universes might exist, but that you are here, conscious, alive, listening, breathing, moving through time in this shimmering instant of being. And maybe, just maybe, the true doorway to the multiverse is not built of technology or physics at all, but of awareness itself, the quiet act of noticing, of resting in the mystery, of allowing the infinite to live through you in the simple rhythm of each breath, each thought, each moment. For if infinity is real, then it is here already, folded into the fabric of now, waiting not to be proven but to be lived. And if we stretch this thread into the twilight spaces where science meets mortality, where philosophy brushes against the edges of death, the multiverse reveals itself as a canvas upon which our deepest fears and hopes are projected. Because what is death in a universe of infinite universes? An ending or merely a doorway, a crossing from one branch into another, from one version of reality into its countless reflections. And if every possible life exists, then somewhere you are still alive, still breathing, still choosing, while somewhere else you have already passed. And in that strange geometry, death loses some of its finality. It becomes less of an absolute wall and more of a turning of pages in a book too vast for any one mind to read in full. And perhaps this is why so many traditions across history have envisioned afterlives, reincarnations, or eternal returns, because the intuition of continuity, the sense that something of us persists, may be less wishful thinking and more a faint echo of a truth glimpsed through the veil, a truth that modern cosmology now edges toward with its whispers of infinity, its recognition that if space is boundless and time is layered, then existence itself is never truly lost, only transformed, recycled, reborn. And here dreams enter the conversation, those nightly voyages into impossible places where logic bends and familiar faces appear in unfamiliar worlds. Because what are dreams if not glimpses into alternate realities? Slivers of consciousness slipping sideways into other timelines, brief visits to the lives we might have lived or are living elsewhere, stitched into our sleep as though the brain itself is a traveler across dimensions, and though neuroscience explains dreams as a byproduct of memory and emotion, one cannot help but wonder if their strangeness, their texture of truth mixed with impossibility, is the subconscious brushing against the multiverse, pulling back with fragments it cannot fully carry. And then destiny arises as another riddle. If infinite branches exist, is anything truly destined? Or is destiny simply the story we tell ourselves to make peace with the path we've walked, even as countless other paths unfold elsewhere? And yet, paradoxically, perhaps destiny is both real and illusory. For in this universe, in this life, you feel its pull, you see how moments align, how chance encounters shape decades, how choices ripple into unforeseen outcomes, and that sense of meaning cannot be erased by the knowledge of infinity, but rather, it is deepened, because it reminds us that even in an endless sea of possibilities, this wave, this crest of experience, is the one you are riding now, and therefore it is sacred. And then the cycles of the cosmos enter, those great rhythms of expansion and collapse, creation and dissolution, that cosmologists speak of when they imagine a universe that may not be singular but part of an eternal dance. Big bangs followed by big crunches, expansions giving way to contractions, universes budding and dissolving like blossoms in a cosmic spring. And if that is so, then perhaps the multiverse is not static but alive, pulsing with rhythms too vast for us to fully grasp, yet faintly echoed in the smaller cycles we live, birth and death, waking and dreaming, beginnings and endings that mirror the larger arc of existence. And to sense this is to feel a strange comfort, a reassurance that nothing is wasted, nothing is final. Everything is part of an infinite unfolding tapestry. And so, the multiverse is not merely a concept in physics, not merely a speculation on paper, but a living mirror held up to our deepest questions, asking us to reconsider what it means to live, to love, to die, to dream, to hope. And as you let that mirror reflect back at you, you may feel both smaller and larger than you imagined, smaller because you are a single flicker in an ocean of infinity, larger because you are infinity itself, momentarily aware of its own mystery. And in that awareness lies perhaps the truest meaning we can draw from the multiverse. Not an answer but an invitation, not a conclusion but an opening, a reminder that existence is not a solved puzzle but a living story, and that the greatest act of wisdom may not be to grasp it all, but to stand in awe beneath its vastness, and to let that awe reshape the way we live each fleeting, irreplaceable day. And if we let this current carry us further into the multiverse's quiet chambers, where love and memory entwine with infinity, we begin to see how even the most intimate human emotions are refracted in this hall of endless mirrors. For love, in a multiverse, is not singular but multiplied into countless variations. Each choice you made to reach for someone's hand branching into realities where you didn't, where another path led you elsewhere. Yet in this universe, in this fragile sliver of possibility, you did, and that choice has become a thread woven into the very fabric of your being, proof that love is not diminished by infinite versions but elevated, because it means that out of endless possibilities, you are living this one, cherishing this bond, feeling this heartbeat beside yours. And memory too becomes something richer when seen through this lens, For what is memory if not a bridge between universes, each recollection reshaping the past slightly, painting it with the brush of the present, so that the version you recall may never perfectly match the version that was. And in this sense, memory itself is multiversal, branching every time you revisit it, creating infinite echoes of the same moment within your own mind. And though that may sound unsettling, it is also beautiful, because it means that even the simplest memory, a childhood laugh, the smell of a grandparent's kitchen, the warmth of sunlight on your skin, exists in more forms than one, layered and alive, each recall another dimension of its existence. And then comes legacy, the question of what endures when a life concludes. For in a single universe worldview, legacy is the mark you leave behind, the ripples of your actions on those who remain. But in a multiverse, legacy multiplies, because in one world your words may inspire a stranger who changes history, in another your kindness may alter a single life's trajectory, and in yet another your absence may echo just as profoundly. And so legacy becomes infinite, not bound to monuments or memory alone but spread like seeds across countless soils, each taking root in ways you may never see. And then we step forward, into the multiverse of the future, where human exploration itself may stretch beyond planets and galaxies to realities stacked atop one another, where instead of traveling outward alone, we learn to travel sideways, slipping between universes as easily as crossing oceans once seemed impossible. And perhaps one day, explorers will not only map the stars but also chart the unseen dimensions, creating atlases not of continents but of realities. And in doing so, humanity will learn that its destiny was never limited to a single universe but to infinity itself. Yet even here, in the dream of cosmic exploration, lies a reminder, because before we ever learn to cross into other universes, we must learn to inhabit this one fully, to explore the unexplored landscapes of our own minds, our own hearts, our own connections, for perhaps the multiverse has been within us all along, each thought a branch, each emotion a world, each life a universe unto itself, and in this way, the idea of infinite worlds is not something distant or abstract but something intimate and immediate, living in the way you choose to notice a sunset, the way you decide to forgive, the way you dare to dream. And so the multiverse, whether or not proven by science, has already reshaped reality, because once the mind has glimpsed infinity, it can never shrink back to the boundaries it once believed were real. It can only expand, wonder, and continue walking, aware now that every step you take is both the only step and one of countless steps across the vast, shimmering ocean of existence. And if we wander deeper into this boundless ocean of thought, we begin to notice how the idea of the multiverse spills quietly into spirituality, because across cultures and centuries, humans have spoken of heavens and underworlds, of rebirth and eternal cycles, of gods who weave endless tapestries of creation. And perhaps these myths and visions were never mere inventions but reflections of something intuited, a sense that reality is layered, that existence is not singular but multiplied. And if that is so, then spirituality itself can be seen as humanity's early language for the multiverse, its poetry for infinity. When a mystic speaks of many worlds, or when an ancient text describes countless realms of being, are they not describing, in metaphor, what physics now whispers in equations? That existence is too vast to be contained within one frame, too abundant to be captured by one story, and so what was once myth becomes a mirror of science, and what is now science begins to sound like myth again, looping us back to the truth that both are ways of trying to grasp what cannot be fully held. And in this looping, art finds its place, for artists too have always painted multiverses, each canvas a world, each novel a dimension, each song a reality unto itself. And in this way art may be the most intimate multiverse we know, because every story told, every melody composed, every image imagined is a universe created within the mind and shared across time. And when we encounter art, we step into those parallel worlds, if only briefly, inhabiting lives and landscapes that never existed outside the imagination, yet feel as real as anything we've touched. And perhaps this is why humans create it all. Not only to reflect this universe but to explore the countless others that exist in possibility, in feeling, in dream, making art the most ancient technology of multiversal travel. And here meaning enters the perennial human question. If infinite universes exist, does that make our lives insignificant, or does it make them infinitely precious? And the answer, quietly, is both, because in one sense we are small, one flicker among endless stars, Yet in another we are vast, because this flicker, this moment, this heartbeat is a universe entire, and the very fact that you are aware of it, that you are conscious of your own existence, is itself a miracle that reverberates through infinity. And so meaning is not lost in the multiverse but transformed, becoming not a matter of finding some cosmic ultimate truth but of choosing, within this version of existence, what to love, what to value, what to honor, and in that choosing you carve a path that is uniquely yours, a thread of light in an endless weave. And so when we think of the multiverse, it is easy to imagine it as something cold, abstract, mathematical, far removed from daily life. But in truth it is the opposite. It is as close as a memory, as warm as love, as immediate as the choice you will make tomorrow, because whether or not other universes exist in physics, they already exist in the human heart, in the imagination that spins endless what-ifs, in the dreams that carry us to impossible landscapes, in the art that births worlds that never were. And so in the end, the multiverse is not something out there waiting to be discovered. It is here, within us, an invitation to see reality not as a single narrow corridor but as a vast, shimmering expanse of possibility, and to live accordingly, wide-eyed, open-hearted, with the humility of knowing we are small and the courage of knowing we are infinite. And as we allow the thought to stretch even further, we begin to ask whether humanity itself might one day take on the role of creator, not just of stories or technologies but of actual universes, because if the multiverse exists as a boundless field of potential, then perhaps advanced intelligence, whether human, post-human, or artificial, could learn to fold that fabric to spark new realities into being, much as stars ignite from the collapse of dust clouds. And while this may sound like myth, reborn, science already whispers of it in the margins. Theories of bubble universes budding off from cosmic inflation, ideas that black holes may be gateways to new realms, that within every collapse may lie a rebirth, and if so, then perhaps the future of intelligence is not only to wander through the universes that exist but to seed new ones, carrying within them the fingerprints of our consciousness, our choices, our questions. And what would it mean to live knowing that one day, the stories we tell, the equations we solve, the technologies we invent, could become the genesis of entire new realities, where perhaps beings look upward and wonder at their own skies, never knowing that their cosmos was born from the dreams of another. And in this way, destiny itself takes on a multiversal hue, no longer confined to survival or progress within this narrow band of time and space, but expanded into the act of creation itself, as though the universe or multiverse seeks to know itself through us each step of evolution, not an accident but a flowering, leading from matter to life, from life to mind, from mind to imagination, and from imagination perhaps to the making of new worlds. Yet even as we contemplate such vast futures, there is a grounding truth, that the seed of all this possibility is already here, in the human capacity to wonder, to imagine, to love, to dream, because every time you imagine another possibility, every time you tell a story that reshapes someone's sense of what is possible, you are already bending the edges of reality, you are already creating new worlds within consciousness, and perhaps that is the true bridge between science and soul, that creation is not only something that happens out there in cosmic inflation or physics experiments, but also in here, within the quiet, infinite expanse of awareness itself. So as we close our eyes and breathe, letting the vastness of these thoughts wash over us, it may be enough not to seek final answers but to rest in the wonder, to recognize that whether or not the multiverse can be proven, it has already expanded us, already reminded us that reality is more abundant, more mysterious, more shimmering than the narrow corridors we sometimes walk, and that in this awareness we are free, not from time or death or limitation, but free to live more fully, to choose more bravely, to love more deeply, because even if infinite versions of you exist, only this one is here, right now, breathing, listening, alive in this extraordinary universe that cradles you. And if we now turn our gaze toward mortality, toward that final frontier which has haunted human hearts since the first flicker of self-awareness, the multiverse begins to cast a strange new light upon it, for death, in the singular universe view, is an ending, a final page after which no chapters remain. But in the multiversal view it becomes less like a door slamming shut and more like a prism, refracting into countless continuations, because if infinite universes exist, then there are versions of you who continue beyond the moment that fells you here, versions where the accident was avoided, the illness never came, the decision unfolded differently, And while those other selves are not you in the narrow sense, they are threads spun from the same loom, echoes of the same pattern, and so death itself begins to feel less absolute, more like a change in perspective, as though one window closes but the house of existence remains vast with infinite rooms. And what of the afterlife that religions have spoken of for millennia? Heavens and hells, cycles of rebirth, eternal returns. Could these too be glimpses of the multiverse, ancient intuitions that there must be more than one path for the soul, that consciousness, too vast to be contained in a single timeline, must find other expressions? Perhaps the afterlife is not a place outside the universe but simply the continuation of awareness along a different branch, a different unfolding. And if so, then death becomes not extinction but transformation, a dissolving from one current into another, unseen by the eyes of this world yet not gone from the larger ocean. And this idea does not diminish grief, for the loss of a loved one in this universe is real. It aches with an undeniable sharpness, but it does offer a gentler lens, suggesting that somewhere, in some branch, their laughter continues, their story still flows, and though we cannot follow it here, perhaps we can feel its resonance, the way music continues in memory even when the instrument falls silent. And for our own lives, this vision changes how we meet mortality. Because if existence is infinite in its possibilities, then the measure of a life is not in how long it lasts or how it ends but in the fullness with which it is lived, the choices made, the love given, the beauty noticed, for those are the universes we truly create, the ones that ripple outward in ways no ending can erase. And so perhaps the gift of the multiverse is not to erase death but to soften its edges, to remind us that endings are never the whole story, that in the vastness of possibility, nothing is ever truly lost, only transformed, only refracted into another form, another path, another unfolding of the infinite mystery we call existence. And if we let that thought flow into the fabric of daily life, the multiverse begins to color even the simplest decisions with a strange kind of depth, because every choice we make, from the smallest gesture to the largest turning point, can be imagined as a branch in the great tree of possibility, one path bending into another, each with its own consequences, its own world unfurling. And while in this universe you may have chosen one direction, in countless others you turned the opposite way, spoke the other word, stayed instead of leaving, and so identity itself becomes a shimmering mosaic, not fixed but spread across an infinite tapestry of selves, some recognizable, some so different they feel like strangers, yet all bound by the common root that is you. And what does this mean for freedom, for the sense of agency that defines human experience? Are we merely players walking down predetermined corridors, or do our choices truly matter if every possibility unfolds somewhere else? And the answer, quietly, may be that they matter more, not less, because in this branch, the singular timeline you are inhabiting now, the choices you make are the ones that shape your lived reality, the one that will etch itself into your memory and the memories of those around you. And so though infinite paths exist, you are here on this one, and it is yours to live, to shape, to honor. And this reframing offers a subtle liberation, because it suggests that regret need not bind us so tightly, that the what-ifs that haunt our minds, what if I had loved differently, what if I had spoken up, what if I had taken the risk, may not be prisons but reminders that somewhere, in some branch, those lives are unfolding, and while we cannot walk them here, we can honor the fact that they exist, that possibility itself is abundant, and let that soften the sharpness of regret. Yet at the same time, the multiverse also deepens responsibility, for it means that this branch, this version of life, is not practice but real, the one that breathes through your lungs and beats in your chest. And so the invitation is not to drift endlessly in what might have been, but to step fully into what is, to live in such a way that this universe, this path, feels like one worth inhabiting. And when seen this way, daily life takes on a new radiance, because every cup of tea, every conversation, every walk through sunlight or rain is not merely ordinary but a miracle of probability, the singular flowering of one reality among endless others, and to notice it, to savor it, is to awaken to the profound truth that though we may dream of infinite worlds, the gift of consciousness is always to return to this one, to the ground beneath our feet, the breath in our chest, the moment, unfolding now here as it is. And when we look to the long arc of human imagination, we see that the seeds of the multiverse have been with us long before physics gave it form, whispered through myth, philosophy, and story, Because long before we had particle accelerators or cosmic background maps, we told tales of other realms, of parallel worlds layered just beyond the veil of our own. From ancient myths of shadow selves and mirrored realities to the mystical visions of sages who spoke of countless heavens and cycles of rebirth, and then, as language and culture evolved, these intuitions poured into literature. Fairy tales of portals hidden in wardrobes, epic poems of dream worlds running alongside the waking one, the eternal suspicion that what we see is not all there is. And in the last century, science fiction became the cathedral where these possibilities were explored most vividly, stories that stretched not just across planets but across realities, from quantum experiments turned into narrative to visions of lives split by choice and chance. And these tales did more than entertain. They trained the human mind to think multiversally, to ask not just what is, but what else, to see life itself as a canvas of branching possibilities. Philosophers, too, circled this mystery, from the ancient Greeks pondering infinite worlds to modern thinkers asking if every possible truth must exist somewhere in the landscape of logic. And woven into all of this is a deeply human instinct, that reality must be larger, stranger, more abundant than the narrow sliver we see from within our limited lifespan. And perhaps this is why the idea of the multiverse resonates so strongly with us today. Not only because science hints at it, but because we are creatures of imagination, beings who have always felt that the boundaries of the known cannot contain the whole. And in this sense, the multiverse is not just a theory of physics but an echo of our own longing, our hunger for wonder, our refusal to believe that the mystery ends where our eyes or our instruments fail. And when science and story intertwine like this, something extraordinary happens. Imagination becomes preparation, shaping how we think, how we dream, how we live, so that when physics finally whispers of quantum branches or inflationary bubbles, we are ready to hear it, ready to fold it into our vision of what it means to be alive in a reality that is wider than we ever dared believe. And now, stepping gently from myth and imagination into the rigorous realm of science, we find that the multiverse is not merely the plaything of poets and storytellers but an idea that has emerged from the very frontiers of physics, whispered into existence by equations and experiments that seem, almost reluctantly, to point toward realities beyond our own, because at the quantum level, the strange, flickering world of particles and probabilities, nature itself appears to branch, every observation splitting the river of possibility into multiple streams. And this is the foundation of the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, which suggests that whenever a quantum event has multiple possible outcomes, reality does not choose one, but rather all outcomes unfold in parallel, creating new universes at every instant. And while this sounds like science fiction, it is rooted in the mathematics of Schrödinger's equations that insist the wave of probability does not collapse but continues to expand, splitting into parallel tracks, which means that right now there are universes where you made different choices, universes where history unfolded along different lines, and while we cannot directly peer into them, their shadow lingers in the logic of the theory. Then, on the cosmological scale, we meet the concept of eternal inflation, the idea that the Big Bang was not a singular event but part of a vast, ongoing process where space itself inflates like an endless fabric, with pocket universes bubbling into existence, each with its own laws of physics, its own constants, its own destinies. And if this is true, then our universe is not unique but one bubble in a cosmic foam so vast it defies comprehension. And still another possibility arises from string theory, which suggests that the fundamental building blocks of reality are not particles but vibrating strings, and that the equations of string theory naturally allow for multiple solutions, multiple universes, each with different shapes of space, different numbers of dimensions, different possible outcomes, and so physics, whether at the smallest scale of particles or the largest scale of the cosmos, seems to be pulling us toward the same conclusion. That reality may not be singular but plural, not one stage but a theater of infinite sets. And yet, the scientific community wrestles with this idea, because while the mathematics hints at it, direct evidence remains elusive, and some argue that the multiverse is not science but metaphysics, because if we cannot test or measure these other universes, how can we claim them as real? But here lies the subtlety. Science has often danced at the edge of the unseen, from atoms once invisible to galaxies beyond telescopes, and so perhaps the multiverse is simply the next horizon, something we cannot yet touch but whose presence we feel in the tremors of our equations, in the strange coincidences of physical constants that seem too finely tuned for chance, as though our universe were one lucky card drawn from an infinite deck, and to explain such improbability, some physicists whisper. Maybe there was no luck at all, maybe all the cards exist and we simply found ourselves in the one that could hold us. And now, stepping gently from myth and imagination into the rigorous realm of science, we find that the multiverse is not merely the plaything of poets and storytellers but an idea that has emerged from the very frontiers of physics, whispered into existence by equations and experiments that seem, almost reluctantly, to point toward realities beyond our own. Because at the quantum level, the strange, flickering world of particles and probabilities, nature itself appears to branch, every observation splitting the river of possibility into multiple streams. And this is the foundation of the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, which suggests that whenever a quantum event has multiple possible outcomes, reality does not choose one, but rather all outcomes unfold in parallel, creating new universes at every instant. And while this sounds like science fiction, it is rooted in the mathematics of Schrödinger's equation, equations that insist the wave of probability does not collapse but continues to expand, splitting into parallel tracks, which means that right now there are universes where you made different choices, universes where history unfolded along different lines, and while we cannot directly peer into them, their shadow lingers in the logic of the theory. Then, on the cosmological scale, we meet the concept of eternal inflation, the idea that the Big Bang was not a singular event but part of a vast, ongoing process where space itself inflates like an endless fabric, with pocket universes bubbling into existence, each with its own laws of physics, its own constants, its own destinies. And if this is true, then our universe is not unique but one bubble in a cosmic foam so vast it defies comprehension. And still another possibility arises from string theory, which suggests that the fundamental building blocks of reality are not particles but vibrating strings, and that the equations of string theory naturally allow for multiple solutions, multiple universes, each with different shapes of space, different numbers of dimensions, different possible outcomes, and so physics, whether at the smallest scale of particles or the largest scale of the cosmos, seems to be pulling us toward the same conclusion, that reality may not be singular but plural, not one stage but a theater of infinite sets. And yet, the scientific community wrestles with this idea, because while the mathematics hints at it, direct evidence remains elusive, and some argue that the multiverse is not science but metaphysics, because if we cannot test or measure these other universes, how can we claim them as real? But here lies the subtlety. Science has often danced at the edge of the unseen, from atoms once invisible to galaxies beyond telescopes, and so perhaps the multiverse is simply the next horizon, something we cannot yet touch but whose presence we feel in the tremors of our equations, in the strange coincidences of physical constants that seem too finely tuned for chance, as though our universe were one lucky card drawn from an infinite deck. And to explain such improbability, some physicists whisper, maybe there was no luck at all, maybe all the cards exist and we simply found ourselves in the one that could hold us. And as we carry this thought forward, it becomes clear that the multiverse is not only a scientific curiosity or a philosophical riddle, but also a mirror reflecting back the trajectory of humanity itself. Because if such an idea begins to permeate our collective imagination, it reshapes how we pursue knowledge, how we build technology, how we tell stories, even how we find meaning in spirituality. For science may become more daring in its search, designing ever more sensitive instruments to catch the faint fingerprints of other realities, patterns in the cosmic microwave background, subtle irregularities in quantum entanglement, gravitational echoes that hint at collisions between universes. Each experiment pushing us closer to what once seemed pure speculation, and technology may be influenced by this quest as well, because the deeper we dive into quantum mechanics, the more our tools themselves are shaped by its principles, from quantum computers that harness the strange superpositions of particles to devices that may someday exploit parallel realities for unimaginable computational power. And as these tools develop, culture too will shift, because already we see how multiverse thinking filters into art, literature, cinema, where parallel worlds and alternate selves have become some of the most captivating narratives of our age. Stories that resonate not only because they entertain, but because they reflect a hidden suspicion within us, that reality is vaster than the narrow corridor we walk each day. And spirituality, too, cannot remain untouched by such an idea, because many traditions have long whispered of multiple worlds, of layers of existence stacked one upon the other, of heavens and hells, of dream realms and reincarnation. And so the scientific multiverse, though born from physics, echoes these ancient intuitions, offering a bridge where science and mysticism meet in their shared awe of what lies beyond. And this convergence may inspire a new humility in us, a recognition that no single worldview, no single dogma, can contain the whole, for the cosmos, if truly plural, is too vast for any one story to claim, and this humility could in turn shape how we treat one another, reminding us that if infinite possibilities exist, then perhaps compassion, curiosity, and wonder are the only anchors we can carry with us, the only constants in a sea of infinite variation. And so the multiverse is not only a theory of the universe but a challenge to us as humans. To expand our imagination, to embrace uncertainty, to find meaning not in fixed answers but in the living act of exploration, because whether or not other universes exist, the very act of asking the question changes us, pulling us toward greater depths of awareness and greater openness to the mystery that has always surrounded us. And if we allow the thread to extend further, the multiverse doesn't just stretch outward into a cold infinity of universes but circles back inward, into the warmth of our own existence, because in imagining countless realities, we're compelled to ask what makes this one so irreplaceably ours, and suddenly the most ordinary moments, a breath drawn in morning light, the laughter of someone we love, the quiet stillness of night, become extraordinary simply because they are happening here, now, in this particular stream of being, and though another version of you may be laughing in another reality, this laughter, in this world, cannot be replaced. It is unique, unrepeatable, and infinitely precious, and perhaps that is the paradoxical gift of the multiverse, that by confronting us with endless abundance, it sharpens our awareness of scarcity, of how fleeting and delicate this lived life really is, reminding us to hold on to it more gently, to live it more fully, to savor its texture, rather than rushing past it. And think of it this way: if infinite possibilities exist, then the fact that you are here, listening, breathing, being, is itself a miracle, a cosmic rarity against impossible odds, and that realization can turn existence itself into a kind of prayer, not in words but in awareness, in the way you pay attention, the way you notice the small patterns of light and shadow, the way you honor the connections that tether you to others, the way you live as though this universe, among countless others, was chosen for you. And in this light, the multiverse is not a threat to meaning but a doorway into deeper meaning. Because if reality is endless, then our task is not to grasp all of it but to be awake to the sliver we inhabit, to tend it with care, to infuse it with kindness, to let our brief flame of consciousness illuminate its corner of infinity. And so, as we drift at the edge of this vast speculation, it is worth remembering that perhaps the real question isn't whether the multiverse exists but what we will do with the universe we know we have. Because in this timeline, in this branch of possibility, we have choices to make, lives to shape, and a world to care for, and maybe that is enough, maybe more than enough, because this one life, set against an infinite backdrop, shines all the brighter for its brevity, for its singularity, for the fact that, among infinite variations, you are here, now, and that alone is astonishing. And so, as the thought of infinite universes settles in your mind like starlight across a dark sky, let yourself breathe into the wonder of it, because whether or not we can prove their existence, the multiverse has already shifted something within you. An expansion of perspective, a loosening of the rigid grip of certainty, an invitation to dwell in mystery rather than rush to conclusion. And in that mystery there is peace, because you no longer have to demand that life be simple or small or entirely understood. You can allow it to be vast, layered, and unfinished, and when you close your eyes tonight, perhaps you'll imagine other versions of yourself drifting through parallel streams of possibility. Yet you'll return gently to the truth that this one, this body, this breath, this moment, is the one you inhabit, and that is enough. So let the idea of infinite worlds soothe you, not overwhelm you. Let it remind you that even in the enormity of all that might exist, this life, brief and singular, is still a miracle to be cherished, and maybe, just maybe, the multiverse is less about finding escape into other realities and more about realizing the preciousness of the reality before you. So rest now, in the strange comfort that even if time bends and universes multiply, you are here, you are alive, and the silence that surrounds you is not emptiness but possibility. And as you drift into sleep, carried by curiosity and calm. May the thought of endless worlds become not a burden but a lullaby, a gentle reminder that you are part of something far larger than you can know, and yet still small enough to belong beautifully to this moment, this night, this dream. And if we allow the thought to linger a little longer, like the fading echo of a bell across a valley, the multiverse becomes less about countless cosmic variations and more about the quiet permission it gives us to release control. Because in a reality where infinite versions of every story unfold, the pressure to perfect this single one softens, and instead of clinging to regret or fearing the future, we can learn to rest in the unfolding of this moment, trusting that life is not measured by its certainty but by the depth with which it is lived. So when you wake tomorrow, and the sun filters through your window, you may feel a quiet shift, as though the ordinary carries a shimmer of the infinite, every detail. Every bird call, every breeze, every breath. A reminder that this timeline is alive, here, and waiting to be noticed. And as the days move on, when you feel the rush of time or the weight of choices, you may recall this vast possibility, not as an escape but as a way of softening into wonder, because no matter how many worlds exist, this one still asks you to show up, to notice, to live. And maybe that is the truest gift the multiverse offers. Not proof of parallel lives, but a lens through which this life feels vaster, richer, more miraculous, a fragile flame flickering against the endless dark. And in that recognition, may you find both humility and courage, the humility to know you are one thread in an infinite tapestry, and the courage to weave your thread with care, love, and curiosity, so that when you finally rest at the end of your days, you will know that in this universe, in this life, you lived deeply, and that was enough. And even as your mind drifts with these thoughts, imagine yourself as both impossibly small and infinitely vast at once, a single human being breathing under a blanket of stars, yet also a participant in a mystery so boundless that no equation, no story, no theory can fully capture it, because whether the multiverse exists in the literal sense or only as a mirror for our imaginations, it has already done something profound. It has stretched your awareness beyond the walls of ordinary time, beyond the narrow corridors of daily life, and into a space where wonder becomes a kind of freedom, where you are no longer trapped by the illusion that life is small, linear, or easily measured, but instead carried by the understanding that existence itself is layered, fluid, and full of unseen dimensions. So tonight, as you prepare to close your eyes, let the thought of countless universes not weigh on you but cradle you, like gentle waves in an infinite sea, each ripple another possibility, each tide another reminder that being alive is the rarest gift of all. And as you surrender to sleep, let yourself feel the quiet hum of your own heartbeat, the soft rhythm of breath moving in and out, and know that even here, in this singular body, in this singular timeline, you are part of something endless, and that realization can be enough to let you drift gently, peacefully, into the vast dreamscape of night. And as the night folds itself gently around you, the multiverse becomes not a distant theory but a companion to your dreams. A reminder that sleep itself is a kind of portal, where the mind drifts into landscapes unbound by the laws of this waking world, where you can step into other lives, other places, other versions of yourself, and though they vanish with the dawn, the impression they leave is real, as though you've touched the edge of something vast and unknowable. And maybe that is the quiet secret hidden in the idea of infinite worlds. That you already carry them within you, every dream a universe, every memory a reality preserved in the folds of your mind, every possibility a shadow stretching across the horizon of what could be. And as you rest now, you do not need to solve the puzzle, you do not need to hold all the answers, you need only let the thought expand within you like breath, opening a space where wonder can live, where the endless does not frighten you but soothes you, where the immensity of existence becomes a kind of blanket, soft and weightless, covering you with the assurance that you are not alone, never small, always connected. So let yourself sink deeper into stillness, as though the currents of infinite time and infinite worlds are carrying you gently downstream, and know that in this moment, in this breath, you are exactly where you are meant to be, and that is enough, always enough. And if you listen closely to that stillness, you may notice that it has its own kind of music, a hum too soft for the ears but felt deep within, like the vibration of strings that stretch across realities, binding you to every possible self you could have been and every path you might still walk. and though you may never step into those other versions with waking feet, their presence lingers like stars in the periphery, reminding you that possibility is always larger than the moment you stand in, and yet, paradoxically, that awareness makes this moment shine brighter, because here is where the endless collapses into the immediate, where infinity becomes a single inhale and exhale, where all the unknown universes fade into the quiet miracle of being alive in this one. And perhaps that is why we are so captivated by the multiverse. Not only because it tempts us with the thought of escape or of lives unlived, but because it returns us, gently and humbly, to the realization that what we do with this universe, with this fleeting span of time, is sacred. For in a sea of infinite variations, this life is unrepeatable. This thread is yours alone to weave. So as you sink deeper into rest, let that realization become a comfort, not a burden. Let it settle into you like the warmth of a blanket at night, reminding you that even if the stars are infinite and the worlds without number, you are not lost in them, you are illuminated by them, you are part of their story, and they are part of yours, and the silence that surrounds you now is not emptiness but fullness, a quiet fullness that asks nothing of you but to breathe, to rest, to drift, and to trust that in the endless expanse of all that could be, this gentle unfolding of the present is more than enough. And as you drift further into this thought, imagine the cosmos itself as a great ocean, and the multiverse as countless waves rising and falling upon it. Each wave a universe, each crest carrying its own galaxies, its own histories, its own endless web of life, and while one wave may break upon the shore and vanish, another rises in its place, carrying forward the eternal motion of possibility, and perhaps you are like a droplet within one of those waves, feeling the pull of the current, certain that this is the whole of existence. Yet beyond your horizon there are other droplets, other waves, other oceans you cannot yet see, and the mystery of it all is not meant to overwhelm you but to remind you of how small and precious this single moment is, how extraordinary it is to be aware at all, to look up at the stars and even ask the question, are we alone, or are we part of something infinitely layered? And in asking, you already step into a deeper kind of belonging, because only a mind alive, awake, and curious could imagine what lies beyond the visible. Only a heart capable of wonder could turn silence into meaning. So let the thought of countless universes not pull you away from this one but anchor you more deeply into it, as though every breath you take is in dialogue with the infinite, every beat of your heart an echo of something vast and eternal. And when sleep comes, as it surely will, let it carry you into dream worlds that feel like whispers of those other realities. Hints of lives unlived and paths untaken, soft previews of the multiverse within you, where memory and imagination dance together in timeless patterns, and as you wander there, know that whether or not the multiverse exists as science suggests, it already lives inside you, because the mind itself is infinite, capable of creating universes each night, and tonight will be no different. Tonight you will drift into infinity, gently, quietly, and safely, carried by the mystery that surrounds you like an endless sky. And if we wander into that deeper layer, science begins to weave its own poetry. For physicists speak of the multiverse not only as metaphor but as mathematical possibility, painting pictures of bubble universes, expanding in an eternal cosmic foam, each bubble sealed from the others yet carrying its own laws of physics, its own constants, its own rhythms of time. And though our instruments cannot pierce beyond the veil of our own bubble, the equations whisper that reality may be far more abundant than what we see. And then there is quantum theory, with its strange insistence that particles can exist in many states at once until observed, a shimmering uncertainty that some minds stretch into the idea of parallel branches, where every choice made, every possibility glimpsed unravels into another timeline, so that in some unfathomable latticework, there is a version of you who turned left instead of right, who spoke instead of stayed silent, who lived a life unrecognizable to this one. And while to some this is dizzying, even frightening, to others it is liberating, because it means no single decision defines you absolutely, that life itself is not a straight line but a branching tree of endless paths. Yet whether these universes are physically real or simply the elegant shadows of our equations, the effect upon the human spirit is the same. We are reminded that the reality we cling to is only one of many ways the cosmos might unfold. And this softens the grip of certainty, loosens the anxiety of finality, and replaces it with wonder. a gentle awareness that life is larger than our small stories. So as you lie here, with the quiet of the night pressing gently against your skin, let yourself feel the immensity of that idea, not as a weight but as a vastness that cradles you. For just as the forest does not end at the edge of the path, so too reality does not end at the edge of what we can measure, and knowing that, you can rest, knowing you are part of something immeasurable, infinite, and endlessly unfolding. And beyond quantum riddles and cosmic bubbles lies another possibility. 1. Whispered by string theory, which imagines reality as a vast symphony of vibrating strings, each tiny filament resonating at frequencies that give rise to everything we know: matter, energy, even the space and time that cradle us. And in some versions of this vision, our universe is not alone but one sheet, one membrane, floating in a higher dimensional expanse alongside countless others, universes stacked like invisible pages brushing together, sometimes colliding in cosmic events so grand they could give birth to new realities. And though we cannot see these dimensions, the mathematics suggests they may be all around us, folded into the very fabric of being. And then there is the anthropic principle, the quiet, unsettling idea that among countless possible universes, only in this one did the conditions align so precisely that stars could ignite, planets could form, and life could bloom, which means our existence is both fragile and inevitable in the same breath. Fragile because it depends on laws so finely tuned that even the slightest shift would erase us, and inevitable because if there are infinite universes, then somewhere, somehow, consciousness was destined to arise and wonder at its own existence. And here you are, one consciousness in a sea of possibilities, asking the question, marveling at the silence between the stars, letting the vastness wash over you like a tide. And yet, while science lays down equations and hypotheses, your mind does something equally powerful. It dreams, it envisions, it tells stories of other selves and other worlds, and in that act alone, you participate in the multiverse, for your imagination is itself a kind of portal, a doorway to realities that exist not in space but in thought, and perhaps that is the hidden truth. That whether or not other universes lie beyond the reach of telescopes, they already live within you, branching with every memory, expanding with every dream, and tonight, as you drift deeper into rest, you can let those infinite worlds bloom quietly in your mind, each heartbeat another universe, each breath another unfolding cosmos, until you are no longer just a person lying in bed but a traveler among endless realms, carried gently through the multiverse of your own inner sky. And if we let the mind wander deeper, we arrive at the story of cosmic inflation, a theory that suggests in the first fractions of a second after the Big Bang, our universe expanded faster than the speed of light, stretching quantum ripples into the vast structures of galaxies we see today. But here lies the astonishing twist. Many physicists believe this inflation may not have been a one-time event, but an eternal process, endlessly creating bubble universes from the vacuum like sparks leaping from a fire, each bubble drifting apart, sealed in its own space and time. And though they can never meet again, the fire burns on, spawning new realities without end, so that our universe is but one flame in an infinite cosmic blaze, and what's more, the rules inside each bubble need not match. Some may hold 3 dimensions, some 10, some may burn with stars, others may collapse in silence, and perhaps in some life emerges in strange unfamiliar forms, or not at all, while in others consciousness arises again and again, asking in its own tongue the same eternal question. Why am I here? And yet, as vast and incomprehensible as this sounds, there is something gentle in the thought, for it means existence is not a rare accident but a flowering, happening everywhere in ways we cannot yet touch. And you, simply by being here, are part of that flowering, a thread in a boundless tapestry. And even dark energy, the mysterious force causing our universe to expand faster and faster, may hold secrets pointing toward multiverse realities. For if the vacuum of space itself can surge with hidden energy, who can say it does not ripple into other domains beyond our view, spilling into places where new universes spark and fade like waves on an endless shore? And as you rest now, hearing these ideas as if they were lullabies of science and wonder, you can imagine yourself floating not in one universe but in a sea of universes, each wave a possibility, each swell a reminder that the cosmos is larger than fear, larger than regret, larger than the smallness we sometimes feel, because even the smallest breath within you is connected to forces that shape galaxies. And in that truth, there is both humility and comfort, a knowing that you are both infinitely small and immeasurably vast at the same time, drifting in the ocean of all that is and all that could be. And so the thought arises that perhaps our universe itself is not the final layer of reality but a projection, a shadow cast from a deeper dimension, much like a hologram contains a three-dimensional image encoded upon a two-dimensional surface, and some physicists suggest that everything we see, touch, and feel, the galaxies, the stars, the mountains, the oceans, even our very thoughts, may be encoded on the distant edge of the cosmos, the event horizon of existence, projected inward to give us the illusion of solidity and depth. And if this holographic principle holds true, then the multiverse takes on yet another face. A vast library of codes and patterns, infinite variations written upon the fabric of higher dimensions, each one unfurling into a universe with its own story. And within that story, beings like us rise, love, grieve, wonder, and ask again the same question: what is beyond this? And if we peer into quantum mechanics, we find the many worlds interpretation, which tells us that every decision, every roll of a dice, every flicker of uncertainty causes reality to split, branching into countless parallel worlds, where in one you turned left instead of right, in another you never met the person who shaped your life, in another you live under stars that shine with different colors, and though these versions are forever beyond your stories spread across infinite branches, all unfolding at once, all carrying a different you through a different path, and some even whisper of simulation theory, daring to ask if our universe is but a grand design, a cosmic simulation so detailed, so perfect, that we mistake it for ultimate reality. And if that is so, then perhaps beyond this layer there are creators, observers, beings who dream universes into being the way we dream stories in our sleep, and we too, in turn, may be part of their endless multiverse. But whether we are holograms, branches of quantum choice, or players in a simulation, the feeling that arises is not fear but wonder, because no matter the framework, the heart of the mystery remains. We exist, we are aware, and we are able to marvel at the sheer impossibility of it all. And as you lie here with your breath steady and your body quiet, imagine the multiverse not as something distant but as something that touches you in this very moment. For the stars above your roof may be mirrored in countless skies. The choices you made today may ripple into endless echoes, and the fact that you are here listening, wondering, resting, is itself proof of a universe rich enough to hold questions as profound as these. And as we let these possibilities unfurl, they reveal not only the strangeness of physics but also the deep intimacy between imagination and reality. For every theory of the multiverse, whether it is eternal inflation spawning endless bubbles, or quantum mechanics splitting realities with each flicker of possibility, or the holographic principle reducing us to shimmering codes upon a cosmic screen, or the simulation theory suggesting we are dreams inside a dream, all of them share a common thread. They expand the horizon of what it means to be alive. They remind us that existence is not a narrow corridor but a vast labyrinth of doors, each opening to another corridor, each turn revealing another version of the infinite. And perhaps the true power of these ideas is not whether they are fact or speculation, but how they invite us to live more fully in this universe we do know, to recognize that even if we are one story among countless others, this story matters, for to you it is everything. And when you think about it, even within this one lifetime you already carry your own multiverse, for every memory you hold is a world you once inhabited. And though those worlds have slipped into the past, they still live within you. The classroom where you first learned to write your name, the streets you once ran barefoot as a child, the rooms filled with voices of people who may no longer be here. All of these are universes preserved in the vault of memory, and when you dream at night, you enter yet another universe, one stitched from fragments of thought and desire, where time bends and logic dissolves, and yet it feels real while you are in it, so real that your heart races and your body stirs as if it were truly happening. In this sense, you are already a traveler of many worlds, slipping seamlessly between waking and dreaming, past and present, imagination and reality, carrying each world within you like a constellation of stars. And if that is so, then perhaps the external multiverse and the internal one are not so different, perhaps they mirror one another, reflecting the truth that reality is not a fixed point but an ever-branching tree, and you, right now, are both the traveler and the tree, the question and the answer, the dreamer and the dream. And as you breathe, steady and unhurried, feel how vast this moment becomes when you open it fully, For in the quiet rise and fall of your chest lies the same rhythm that carries galaxies apart, the same rhythm that may beat across endless universes, a pulse of existence that binds all worlds together. And in that rhythm there is no need to grasp, no need to solve, only to be, to rest in the wonder that you are here, listening, thinking, imagining, alive in this particular universe, while countless others whisper beyond the veil, waiting, shimmering, existing just out of reach, like stars hidden behind the horizon. And if we follow this river of thought further, we encounter the idea of cyclic universes, where instead of a single beginning and a final end, the cosmos itself is an eternal heartbeat, expanding outward in a grand breath, then collapsing inward in a cosmic exhale, only to be born again in another Big Bang, and this cycle repeats endlessly, each universe giving rise to the next like waves rolling one after another upon the infinite shore of time. And if this is true, then our universe is not unique in its birth or its death, but simply a chapter in a story without beginning or end, a cycle of destruction and renewal that mirrors the patterns we see everywhere else, from the seasons turning, to cells dividing, to our own lives unfolding in rhythms of birth, growth, decay, and rebirth. So perhaps even the universe itself is alive in a way, breathing across scales too vast for us to feel. And then, there are the ekpyrotic models, born from string theory, where our universe is but a membrane, what physicists call a brain, floating in a higher dimensional space, and occasionally, these brains collide, and from that collision bursts forth a new universe, its energy spilling outward into galaxies and stars, time itself unfolding from the impact. And if brains continue to drift and collide, then there may be countless universes born in this unseen higher dimensional sea, each one shaped by the ripples of collisions beyond our perception. And this vision adds another layer to the multiverse, suggesting that we are not isolated at all, but part of a dance of vast, invisible structures, colliding and rebounding, birthing reality after reality, like sparks leaping from stones struck together in the dark. And still we return to the question, what does this mean for us, here, now, breathing in this one fragile universe? Perhaps it means that impermanence is not the end but the rule, that the flow of time and change is the very essence of reality, and that even as everything shifts, there is something eternal beneath it all, a pattern that repeats across scales, weaving galaxies, lives, and moments together in a tapestry that no single universe could hold alone. And so, as you listen in the stillness, you may feel yourself expand beyond your skin, beyond your room, into the rhythm of a cosmos that does not end, but transforms, and in that transformation, every version of you, every possibility of your life, every universe that could be or has been, is all part of the same boundless story, the story of existence itself, endlessly unfolding, endlessly returning, endlessly whispering. You are not separate, you are not small, you are part of all of it. And as we let our imagination and science stretch further, we encounter quantum loop cosmology, a daring framework that proposes space and time themselves are not smooth and continuous but granular, woven out of tiny loops of quantum geometry. And in this vision, the Big Bang was not the beginning but a big bounce, where a collapsing universe shrank until quantum gravity refused to let it reach an infinite singularity, instead rebounding outward into the cosmos we now inhabit, meaning that before our universe there may have been another, and before that another still, each collapsing and rebounding endlessly like a pendulum swinging between creation and dissolution. And if so, then we are children of a cycle that predates memory, living in a cosmos where time arcs in curves far larger than we can fathom. And then there are thought experiments like Boltzmann brains, where in an unimaginably vast and eternal universe governed by probability, random fluctuations of matter and energy could assemble a fully formed consciousness, complete with memories of a life that never was, a mind adrift in the void believing itself to be part of a reality that exists only in its own perception. And while this idea sounds fantastical, it pushes us to confront the fragility of what we call real. For how do we know that our memories and our continuity are not such an emergent fluctuation, stitched together by the laws of chance? And beyond even this lies the mystery of cosmic horizons, boundaries of perception set by the finite speed of light, beyond which countless galaxies race away faster than their light can ever reach us, meaning that there may already be regions of our own universe as inaccessible as another dimension, forever cut off from our observation. And if beyond that horizon there lie other universes, Stitched to ours or separated entirely, we may never know them directly, but still they whisper in the equations of physics, teasing us with their shadows. And through all of this, through loops of time, through phantom brains, through unreachable horizons, there runs a deeper invitation, a reminder that the multiverse is not merely a theory of astrophysics but a mirror held up to our own experience of reality. For just as the cosmos may hold infinite worlds beyond our reach, our own minds hold infinite possibilities, branching stories, alternate versions of ourselves that live in memory, in imagination, in the choices we did not make but still carry within us, so that, in a very real sense, each of us is already a multiverse, each thought a galaxy, each dream a universe in miniature, and perhaps that is why this mystery speaks to us so deeply, because when we wonder whether we live in a multiverse, we are also wondering whether we, ourselves, are infinite. And if we keep stretching into the further edges of speculation, we come to the strange and sprawling idea of the string landscape, where string theory suggests not one neat solution for the laws of physics but an almost uncountable number, perhaps 10 to the power of 500 different possible universes, each with its own arrangement of physical constants, forces, and dimensions. And in that incomprehensible vastness lies the possibility that our universe is just one random bead in a cosmic necklace, its laws of physics not divinely ordained but simply one of many possible outcomes, a patch of cosmic fabric in a quilt so large that the human mind cannot even begin to grasp its full expanse. And in this vision we encounter the anthropic principle, the unsettling notion that the reason we observe this universe, with its delicate balance of forces and constants that allow stars to shine and life to bloom, is not because it is uniquely designed for us but because, out of the countless universes that exist, only a few would have the right conditions to sustain observers at all. So we find ourselves here because we could not be anywhere else, for in universes where gravity was too strong or the electromagnetic force too weak, stars would not form, chemistry would not unfold, consciousness would never awaken, and there would be no one to ask the question, why are we here? A sobering but strangely beautiful idea, that our existence is both trivial in the vast sweep of possibilities and yet profoundly special because it is only in such a rare universe that a mind could exist to wonder about universes at all. And from there, some thinkers leap even further into the possibility that consciousness itself is not confined to this one reality but might touch across dimensions, that what we call awareness is not merely a byproduct of neurons firing but perhaps a fundamental feature of reality itself, woven into the fabric of existence like space and time, and if that were true, then perhaps in the multiverse our consciousness could drift, overlap, or even resonate across versions of ourselves like a melody echoing through parallel halls. And though these ideas stand on the knife edge of science and philosophy, they carry with them a kind of poetry, for they remind us that we are not just passive observers trapped in one timeline but beings capable of imagining countless others, and that act of imagination itself is a form of exploration, as though by simply thinking of other universes, we touch them in some hidden way. So breathe for a moment and feel how even now, your mind has expanded outward, through brains and bounces, through loops of time and seas of universes, and yet you remain here in this singular world, listening, alive, suspended between the known and the unknown, and perhaps that is the greatest mystery of all, that in a cosmos that may contain infinite realities, you are experiencing this one, and for reasons science cannot yet explain, this version of you, this life, this fragile now, is the one unfolding. And yet, as we stand at this threshold where science blurs into philosophy and imagination stretches its wings wider than equations can hold, we cannot help but drift into the possibility of simulated realities, where what we call the universe might not be a primordial accident of physics at all but a deliberate creation, a simulation run by some intelligence far beyond our comprehension. And if technology continues to advance in any civilization, perhaps the ability to create entire simulated worlds filled with conscious beings is inevitable, and if so, then the number of simulated universes could vastly outnumber the so-called real one, making it statistically more likely that we are living inside a simulation than outside of it. And though this idea unsettles, it also invites wonder, for it raises the question of whether our choices are our own or lines of code, whether the stars above are ancient furnaces of hydrogen or beautifully rendered pixels in a cosmic program, and whether the multiverse itself could be a layered hierarchy of simulations stacked one upon another like reflections in an infinite hall of mirrors. And from here, thought wanders into quantum immortality, a hypothesis rooted in the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, suggesting that from the first-person perspective, one never truly experiences death, because in every moment where death is possible, there exists another branch of the multiverse where survival continues, and consciousness flows along that branch, never able to perceive the ones in which it ended, leading to the haunting possibility that from your own perspective you are immortal, endlessly shifting into versions of reality where you endure, while from the outside you are seen to perish. And though this idea is deeply controversial, it reminds us again of the peculiar role consciousness plays in the multiverse story. And beyond these theories we arrive at visions of higher dimensional beings, entities that might perceive the multiverse not as separate, discrete realities but as a single vast structure. Much as we look at a map and see entire cities, rivers, and roads at once, so too might a being of higher dimensions see all universes simultaneously, past, present, and future folded together in one eternal view, and from their perspective, our questions of beginnings and endings, of one reality or another, might seem as small and fleeting as the way we look upon ants weaving their paths across the earth. And what are we to make of all this? Simulations, immortality, higher beings, except that the multiverse, whether real or imagined, is a canvas upon which the human mind paints its deepest longings and fears, our desire for meaning, our hope for continuity, our hunger to know what lies beyond the horizon of the possible. And in this act of painting we reveal something profound. That curiosity itself is infinite, that even if our universe were the only one, the fact that we can conceive of others means we are already living in a multiverse of thought, where imagination creates worlds as real to our minds as any galaxy of stars, and perhaps that is where the true multiverse resides, not only out there in physics and dimensions, but in here, in the boundless expanse of the human spirit. And as we let the thread unfurl even further, drifting now into a more dreamlike current, we find ourselves asking not only about the physics of many worlds but about the soul of it all, about what it means if there are countless versions of you scattered across endless realities, some who chose differently, some who never met the people you know, some who perhaps never existed at all, and this raises the haunting yet beautiful question of whether identity itself is fixed or fluid, whether you are the sum of this one timeline or a constellation of selves glittering across a multiverse of possibility. And if so, perhaps what we call the soul is not confined to this narrow corridor of space-time, but is instead the thread that ties all these versions together, the quiet essence that carries continuity even as universes split and branch, like a melody weaving through endless variations yet always recognizable, always somehow you. And in that vision, the multiverse is not a cold, indifferent scattering of worlds but a grand cosmic chorus, each version of you singing a note, together forming a harmony that only higher dimensions could fully hear. And suddenly the idea of eternity takes on a new meaning. Not a single endless life but an infinity of lived moments, each unique, each precious, flowing into a boundless whole. And when we contemplate this deeply, we realize that even our longing for meaning, our yearning for permanence is itself a reflection of the multiverse, for within us we already hold multiple selves, the child you once were, the dreamer you are, the elder you may become, all existing at once within memory and imagination, showing us that the multiverse is not only a physical hypothesis but a lived truth, mirrored in our own experience of being many things at once. And then, as we return for a moment to science, we see how cosmic inflation, the violent swelling of the universe in its first fraction of a second, might have seeded not just galaxies but whole pocket universes, bubbles in a frothing sea of space-time, each bubble sealed off from the others, each expanding into its own cosmos with its own laws, and ours is simply one bubble among countless others, drifting in an endless sea, a thought both humbling and exhilarating, for it means that what we call everything may be nothing more than a small eddy in a boundless ocean. And dark energy, that mysterious force pushing our universe apart at an ever-accelerating pace, may itself be different in other bubbles, stronger, weaker, or absent altogether, shaping universes where stars never form, or where matter collapses quickly into black holes, and we begin to see the landscape of the multiverse as a tapestry of variety. Each thread a cosmos, most lifeless and silent, but a few rare ones, like ours, filled with the music of awareness, of eyes gazing at stars, of voices asking questions in the night. And so, standing here in this unfolding mystery, perhaps the most profound realization is not whether the multiverse exists out there, but that it exists in here, in the mind that can dream it, in the imagination that can conjure infinities from silence, because even if all we have is this one universe, the fact that we can conceive of endless others is proof that within us lies something just as vast, something unbounded, something timeless, and in that recognition, we find both humility and wonder, knowing that whether or not we walk among infinite worlds, we already carry infinity inside ourselves. And as we let the thread unfurl even further, drifting now into a more dreamlike current, we find ourselves asking not only about the physics of many worlds but about the soul of it all, about what it means if there are countless versions of you scattered across endless realities, some who chose differently, some who never met the people you know, some who perhaps never existed at all, and this raises the haunting yet beautiful question of whether identity itself is fixed or fluid, whether you are the sum of this one timeline or a constellation of selves glittering across a multiverse of possibility. And if so, perhaps what we call the soul is not confined to this narrow corridor of spacetime but is instead the thread that ties all these versions together, the quiet essence that carries continuity even as universes split and branch, like a melody, weaving through endless variations yet always recognizable, always somehow you. And in that vision, the multiverse is not a cold, indifferent scattering of worlds but a grand cosmic chorus, each version of you singing a note, together forming a harmony that only higher dimensions could fully hear, and suddenly the idea of eternity takes on a new meaning. Not a single endless life but an infinity of lived moments, each unique, each precious, flowing into a boundless whole. And when we contemplate this deeply, we realize that even our longing for meaning, our yearning for permanence, is itself a reflection of the multiverse, for within us we already hold multiple selves, the child you once were, the dreamer you are, the elder you may become, all existing at once within memory and imagination, showing us that the multiverse is not only a physical hypothesis but a lived truth, mirrored in our own experience of being many things at once. And then, as we return for a moment to science, we see how cosmic inflation, the violent swelling of the universe in its first fraction of a second, might have seeded not just galaxies but whole pocket universes, bubbles in a frothing sea of spacetime, each bubble sealed off from the others, each expanding into its own cosmos with its own laws, and ours is simply one bubble among countless others, drifting in an endless sea, a thought both humbling and exhilarating, for it means that what we call everything may be nothing more than a small eddy in a boundless ocean. And dark energy, that mysterious force pushing our universe apart at an ever-accelerating pace, may itself be different in other bubbles, stronger, weaker, or absent altogether, shaping universes where stars never form, or where matter collapses quickly into black holes, and we begin to see the landscape of the multiverse as a tapestry of variety. Each thread a cosmos, most lifeless and silent, but a few rare ones, like ours, filled with the music of awareness, of eyes gazing at stars, of voices asking questions in the night. And so, standing here in this unfolding mystery, perhaps the most profound realization is not whether the multiverse exists out there, but that it exists in here, in the mind that can dream it, in the imagination that can conjure infinities from silence, because even if all we have is this one universe, the fact that we can conceive of endless others is proof that within us lies something just as vast, something unbounded, something timeless, and in that recognition, we find both humility and wonder, knowing that whether or not we walk among infinite worlds, we already carry infinity inside ourselves. And so, as we arrive at the quiet edge of this vast journey, drifting between equations and imagination, between galaxies and the hidden chambers of the mind, the question of the multiverse remains both unanswered and endlessly alive, for perhaps it was never meant to be solved like a puzzle but contemplated like a poem, a reminder that the universe or universes are far greater than our ability to contain them in words, and yet we try, because it is in the trying that we glimpse the beauty of being human. The courage to wonder, the audacity to imagine, the humility to admit we do not know, and maybe never will. So whether we are one universe or many, one version of ourselves or a countless constellation, the truth is that what we have right now, the breath in our lungs, the stars above, the fleeting spark of curiosity in this very moment, is enough to remind us that we are part of something immeasurable, something worth cherishing. And as you let these thoughts settle, perhaps you can feel the stillness underneath them all, like the deep silence between heartbeats, the eternal ground on which every possible world might rest, and in that silence, there is peace, a reminder that no matter how vast the cosmos may be, no matter how many versions of reality stretch beyond the horizon, you are here, now, alive in this moment, and that is a miracle all its own. So as we close tonight's journey, take one slow breath, let it fill you, let it leave you gently, and know that wherever the multiverse may lead, this moment is yours, this awareness is yours, and it is enough. Thank you for walking this path with me, through galaxies of thought and oceans of wonder, and until we meet again, rest well, dream deeply, and let curiosity always be your compass.